Night Live. This is the first time we've done the show in just about 2 years, and we're at a new location. We used to do the show at Ace Cafe in downtown Orlando, and now we're at my second home, Porsche South Orlando. There's been quite a lot going on here in the last 2 years, with me and with the show. So I want to cover a little bit of that and get right into our guest tonight. So, when we look back over the beginning of the pandemic, we had to lock everything down, and we went ahead and really thought about that in terms of how we would get the show started back up, and it just wasn't the right time. We just didn't find the right combination of things to come back together, but I think tonight is the right time. We're coming up on the race at Daytona, the 24-hour race, and we have a special guest tonight who has a long history with that race, and we think everything's just going to come together perfectly for that. So I want to introduce to you here in just a minute John Shapiro. Has been involved in sports car racing for most of his life, and I want to run down a little bit about what he's accomplished in the sport to sort of give you a little frame of reference who we're speaking to tonight, and then get right into the conversation with John. So really for him, it started in professional racing back in the early 80s. 1982, he was with a team called JLP Racing, and they won the IMSA Championship, which that's the sanctioning body that runs the 24-hour race at Daytona these days, and they won the championship that year in 1982. A young crew chief and a young driver by the name of John Paul Jr. joined John Shapiro here, and they combined with a great team and had an awesome season and won the 1982 championship. That same year, though, they won both the 24-hour race at Daytona and the 12-hour race at Sebring. These are two of the top 3 sports car races in the world every year, and they won them back-to-back in that same championship season. Really an outstanding accomplishment, and something that people have been talking about for years who work in the sport and really appreciate the sport. As you move forward from there, it got into the mid-'80s, and John joined another team and had success in 1985 with the Swap Shop team in a Porsche 962. They won again back-to-back Daytona and the 12 Hours of Sebring in 1985. In 1986, John brought me onto the team. So I joined the fun in 1986. We had a great result that year. We'll talk about it a little bit more in the show later, but we finished second at the 24-hour race that year and had a great run. In 1989, John was part of another team that won the 24-hour race in another Porsche 962. And then as you move forward from there, he got involved in some of his own racing teams, got involved in IndyCar racing along in that same time frame, was also involved with John Paul Jr. back in the mid-'80s. I think it was about 1983 when they went IndyCar racing and won the Michigan 500 IndyCar race. Everyone knows what an IndyCar is in the United States, and to be able to win a 500-mile race like the Michigan 500 was something that was super special back then, super special today, and just another outstanding achievement. More recently, John has worked with Ferraris. He sort of switched gears and moved from Porsche into Ferrari and had tremendous success in 2016. He was part of the championship team in the Ferrari Challenge Series. They have a special race called the Ferrari Finale Mondiale. It's essentially the world championship for Ferrari Challenge racing, and in that year they were able to take home the prize. So John has done a lot in his racing career. We want to get into some more conversation about more of the details and really give you his perspective of racing and how things have changed over the years and what he's done. So we're going to dig right into it, John. So welcome to Porsche Night Live.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, really appreciate you having here. And I think, as I mentioned, I think the timing is just perfect with the 24-hour race just happening up the road, and so many people coming in for that race, fans, racing teams. Literally people travel from around the world every year to come to the Daytona 24. And we were speaking just before the show about something that you did very special up at Daytona here just recently. I guess it was just last night, some sort of a special gathering of guys. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
I have a list of accomplishments, but I had dinner with, had the pleasure and the honor of having dinner with a group of guys that, like me, dedicated their lives to motorsports. And we're talking guys that were with the Ferrari Formula One team in 1960.
Wow.
I mean, we're real career motorsports guys, and that have won this race many times themselves, and so there's multiple Daytona winners and Subarus and championship winners. It was like I said, it was a very special dinner last night. So.
Wow, that must have been a lot of fun.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Right? We say it all the time in the Porsche community. It's not necessarily all the cars; it's about the people. And
that's what it is. And we sat around and we look up and down, and all the conversations. We're moving around the tables and everybody, and that was the common mention in the conversation, was that it is about the people. And where do you work where you can say, I know that guy for 40 years?
Yeah, that's pretty special.
Yeah,
that's awesome. So the special dinner that they had right up at Daytona, since everyone is gathering, it's again perfect timing, just sort of like tonight to have that happen.
Very convenient, yeah.
Yeah, awesome. So for you though, it wasn't was it the racing bug that got you as a kid, or was it just cars in general? It was racing that got you? Mm-hmm. So what was it? What triggered it?
Well, back then, remember the Wild Motorsports?
Oh yeah.
And they'd always show the Formula One races as well as IndyCar races, specifically the Indy 500.
Sure.
And one day I was watching the 500, as I had done since I can remember. I was 10. It was 1970, and there happened to be a car named the Johnny Lightning Special. So of course that caught my. That's my car. So I'm watching the Johnny Lightning Special, and it happened to be Al Unser Sr., and he won the race. Who knew that 15 years later or something, I'd be working with him.
Yeah, right? Wow. Isn't that something?
So, yeah.
So that's where it all started.
That's where it started.
It was Wide Rule of Sports, Indy 500.
That's what I want to do.
Wow.
And I say, hey, Mom, this is what I want to do. And just like most good mothers, they said, well, if you put your mind to it, you could do it. So I was like, okay.
Let's go.
Yeah, so it's good.
Oh, that's awesome. So it all started there. How did you sort of get involved in it? Like, if you talk to somebody about motorsports, it's how do you start in that? Like, what do you do?
I can't tell you how many times I've been asked that question. How do you? I happened to get a job with a foreign car repair place that happened to do race tuning and race prep and things for local racing, and they happened to be taking care of Preston Hen's two 935s. And so this shop had several bays where we were at work on the regular customer cars, and I knew there was a bay that had these race cars. And I had been to Daytona as a spectator, hanging on the fence, 1977, 78. And I'd never seen these cars up close, but I knew what a 935 was, of course. And I was dying to get in that. And so finally one day that bay was open. So I got in there and I'm all over these things. And he says, you're not getting paid to look at these cars. And she's like, it's okay, I'll clock in in a little bit, I'm 20 at this time. So, 21, sorry. So, comes up, there are races coming up. They're going to prep these two cars to go to a race. And the guy says, you want to come? You want to go to the race? And I was like, yeah. He says, we can only pay you $50 a day. I said, well, that was more I was making at the time anyway.
Sure. Yeah.
So I said, sure, I'm in. Oh, by the way, you got to ride in the tractor trailer if you want to go. I'm in. Of course, the tractor trailer barely made it, and there's no air conditioning, and it was a rough ride, but it was worth every minute.
So this was 1981? Roundabouts, yeah. And so this is with Preston Hen. This is with the swap shop team.
Yeah, and the race was a race in Riverside, California. That track is long gone.
Yeah.
We took two cars, and I didn't even know what I was doing, but here I am now working on these cars, and I'm figuring them out pretty quickly and which way to get my way around them, and suddenly I'm in.
Right. Yeah.
And
it's happening.
It was happening. So it wasn't long before. Actually, it was right after that race. Both cars were crashed, and one of the cars had to go to Le Mans. So there was a shop in Georgia that was going to do the repair work on this. This one car had to get repaired and get on the plane that's going up, and you're going with the car. Well, okay. So now I'm loading these cars. You got to get them. There's a motor coming, and you got to take that gearbox. And I've never done one of these gearboxes. I guess I'll figure it out, you know. So I prep this one car. It gets loaded, and it goes to Le Mans and whatever. But in the meantime, one of the mechanics there took a liking to me.
Okay.
And he said, you ever thought about working for a real race team? I said, well, yeah, sure. He says, because, not far away from here is JLP Racing. Well, I knew who they were, of course. So I said, yeah, you get me in. So he gives me a calls John Sr., and we arranged a meeting at the Paul Revere 250 in Daytona.
Oh, yeah.
So
that was July 4th weekend every year.
July 4th weekend,
right?
Yeah, sure. And at the time, I thought this was a tremendous opportunity. But what I did come to find out is that nobody wanted to work for John Paul. So they were starving for people. So like,
They had the hook in you right there, and they're like, okay, we got this kid.
So the funny part is, so I go to do my my interview with Senior, and I'm walking up to the motorhome. The door flies open, and there's expletives of no, you too, and it's a woman. She's leaving and it turns out that's John Jr.'s girlfriend, and they were just having this big blowout, which they had daily, and in the motorhome, and I'm standing there, and it's like,
welcome to racing,
right? And so somebody comes to close the door and says, well, can I help you? I says, well, yeah, I'm here to meet with Senior. Oh, come on in. So I come in, and fast forward, can you be here tomorrow? I'm like, sure. Back to Fort Lauderdale, get the TR6, put the toolbox in the trunk. It doesn't fit, ain't a little tight. Some bungee cords, and I hit the road. And I was married at the time, and I didn't see my wife for 17 weeks.
Wow.
We were on the road.
That long.
So
this was the year before the
81
championship season.
81 IMSA series. Yeah.
81 season, yeah.
Yeah, and the way they had the races were every weekend or every other weekend. It was really a grind.
Yeah. So it was kind of baptism by fire, but it was awesome because you got the reps.
Sure.
Like you were in it. You were having to work with things all the time. So it was
fake it till you make it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's really how it was.
And so I guess things progressed in 1981, and you must have been turning the right wrench and following the right direction, and maybe coming up with some things on your own that impressed them or something. Because how did you end up being now a crew chief on a car the next year? Like, how you went from literally having no experience in racing to now there.
All right. I wanted to be there, first of all. So I first one there, last one to leave, that kind of thing.
Right.
Any job that no one wanted to do, I'd do it. So I just made it happen, so to speak.
Yeah.
And credit to John Paul Sr., he saw something and gave me opportunities.
Right.
And the one thing about him, anybody that came up with an idea, he'd listen. So he's known to be this tyrant, but he really, was different in the shop. So I'd have some ideas, and he'd go, I don't know, let's try it. And sometimes it worked, and that's how it progressed.
Right.
And I was the only one with ideas, it seemed. And that was part, I guess, of the way that I got to move up on the team quite quickly.
So you and his son, so this was John Paul Sr., you and his son, John Paul Jr., were same age?
A month apart.
Month apart.
1 year old.
Month apart.
One month older.
So he's the hot shot driver, you're the hot shot mechanic, and it's like it was like a match made in heaven. You hear about racing today, whether it be NASCAR or IndyCar, and you hear about this relationship that drivers have with their engineers, and if this is or their crew chief or whatever, if it's a good relationship, then magic happens. Things happen.
That's real.
That's real. So that was your first real experience with that. Really having a connection with a driver and being on the same page and seeing success as a result.
Yeah.
Wow.
And he was a do or die driver. That he was, we toasted him last night. So as being one of the most fearless drivers ever.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, he had a tremendous career.
big heart, yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. So 1982, that championship season, you run through. There's probably close to 20 races. I think I read maybe there was 19 races that year, and I think you guys won 9 of the 19 races.
That was in 82.
Was that in 82? That's what I mean. The championship season. So an incredible run. Winning all the big races, the big long distance races too. 9 wins out of 19. So that just what did that do? For your career, for your confidence, for yours, for John Paul Jr.'s. When you got to the end of that season, what were you guys thinking? What was the next thing?
Well, the next thing was IndyCar.
Okay.
And that was, John had expressed that that's the direction he wanted to go, and John and Sr. made a deal and facilitated that for him. And the 9 wins in 82 are just a result of all the hard work in 81. We were leading the championship in 81. We were meant to win it, the last race. It's in the bag. And like I said, do or die, I'm on the radio. A driver that we knew that had his car broken down comes running into the pits, 3/4 of the way into the pits, and he says, he's drifting in NASCAR 4.
This is at Daytona.
Pre-bus stop.
Okay,
so by the time you get to NASCAR 4, you're going 700 miles an hour. Those cars are way fast. And all we had to do was finish in front of Brian Redmond in the Lopa. And he's just driving away. I'm begging him on the radio, Johnny, please slow down. But when he had it in his head to just dominate, that was his thing.
That was his thing.
And sadly, the right rear blew up in NASCAR 3, and that was it. It was over. We lost the championship for that. Yeah.
Right. So sometimes the best lesson is taught from experience.
Yeah, we never. I don't think we ever had that problem.
And made some adjustments from there. Yeah, for sure. So that led to IndyCars, and so the Michigan 500. Like, how many times had John Paul Jr. driven in an IndyCar race before he won that race?
That was his 3rd race.
Unbelievable. Wow.
Yeah. 84. Sorry, but at the time he was the youngest winner of that race, and the first race was Atlanta Motor Speedway, and we finished 3rd. The second race was Long Beach, and we're running 2nd. And Mario's leading, of course.
Mario Andretti.
Yeah. And well, he was the king of Long Beach for a while.
Yeah.
And so we were doing just fine, and we was like, okay, we're going to end up with a 2nd here. And the wheel falls off. It comes loose, it runs down. Before, now they have these retaining systems that when the nut comes loose, the wheel won't leave.
Yeah.
It stays on. It comes loose, and you can make it back to the pit lane. But back then, there was no such thing, so the wheel just
exited.
And we're waiting for him to come back around. Of course, he never came back around. So, but we're running strong. We're in a car that's old, already outdated car. But an engineer named John Ward had come up with a new floor, tunnels, with his own idea, and it was the same old PC-10 that no one even wanted to look at. And that change alone made the car very competitive.
Wow.
So here we are running up front and doing well. And we get to Indy, and doing great, running fast times, and sadly he has a practice crash, and which takes him out of the race, and we had to put Jeff Brabham in the car as an alternate, and we had the race won, and Jeff at the last pit stop, he stalled the motor, and we had the car, he tried to get it kicked out, bump started, and so he kept going farther and farther away from us, and we're running after him like, no. And we pull him back and get him started. By the time we get, we finished 4th, and that's our first 500. So it was a big deal.
Yeah.
And that also showed how competitive, how good the car was.
So that it was a natural thing to do well at a track like Michigan.
So the next race we missed because Johnny basically has got a full cast on the left leg. They had to, when he hit the wall, he lost his left heel. So they had to make a heel out of his piece of his hip bone.
Unbelievable.
Right, so the next race is Michigan. So now we cut the cast off, and the EMT guys gave us those, the kind of the strap-on plastic things that you Velcro. Yeah. So we put something on that, but we had to lower him in the car, and we were fast. It was a great day, and it was not a gift at the end. He actually won that race, fair and square.
So can you imagine? You talk about in regular terms. You have an accident at work, and then somehow they're taking a piece of your hip and making a heel for you, and then the next day you get up and you go to work, and you do your thing, and the best possible thing to that point happens, right? You win a race. That's just unbelievable to think that that he, at that young age, had so much to give that he was willing to literally give up his body, right, to make it happen and to do this. Oh, wow, I had never heard that story. I'd heard about the break, I guess, but I didn't realize the heel thing and this all.
He was in so much pain.
Wow.
It was incredible. Well, the funny part of that story is they were going to take the piece of the hip from the right side, and he said to the doc, no, you can't. I drive ovals. You got to take it from the left side because I'm going to be racing in 3 weeks, and it'll hurt.
It'll hurt because you'll be loading up on that side.
Like, okay,
we can do that. That works just fine. So you have the whole IndyCar season in '83, and then when did you switch back to the sports cars? Because there was success there. So when did all that happen? So '83 was in IndyCars. What happened in '84?
84 was
IndyCars too?
Yeah, and that's when I worked with Emerson at the 500.
Okay, so Emerson Fittipaldi.
Yeah.
How did that come about? How did you? That's
kind of a funny story. Also,
in the motorsports world, Emerson Fittipaldi. This is like an Andretti name. This is a world champion Formula One driver.
And
so how did you get that call?
He was God. He was just one of those guys that like Mario or anybody else.
Yeah.
He was really a very special guy. So. I'm with VDS, which is the team that was running Johnny. And sadly, halfway during the month of May, there's a budget change, and we can no longer carry on. And so we're done. But for the last couple of weeks, this guy, who's the crew chief of Emerson's team, has been bugging me. Please come work for me. We need you. Come work for me. Come work. No, I'm happy here. Everything's great. And the day before, he says, please, can you just come over and have a look and see what you think? I said, dude, I'm really happy. Leave me alone. That happens. He hears about it. He comes straight back and he says, you roll your toolbox over tomorrow morning.
The time has come.
You've got a job. And I said, I'm in. Okay, I'm good. I rolled my toolbox over in the morning, and everybody's looking at me like, who are you? I says, well, so-and-so told me I was going to, start working. He says, oh, he got fired last night.
The guy who hired you got fired the night before.
So the team owner was standing there. He says, okay, great, we need you. He said, can you engineer? I said, well, yeah, a little bit. I've been doing that for a while. And he says, okay, great. So the only day left is what they call Carburation Day, which is the Thursday before race. Then after Carburation Day, which was meant back in the day, it was meant for exactly that, carburation, setting the weather for maybe between Thursday and Sunday. It was going to be, because it was a lot of work to get the carburation right back in the early days. Now, by then, it was turned out just to be the last practice day to get all your tires scrubbed, and So we have Carburation Day, and we're out there running, doing what everybody's doing, scrubbing tires for the race. And Emerson starts I said, can we do can we waste the set of tires and do a whole race run? Full tank to empty. He says, that's a good idea. We haven't done that all month. I says, okay. So we do it, and like toward the end of so he comes in, parks, get out, we start talking. He says, the car was really fast at the end of the stint. He says, but if the track changes at all and it goes loose, we're going to be in trouble. We need to do something just in case the track goes loose. We need to snug it up a little bit. That's my term, but there's different, the NASCAR and sports cars, understeer, oversteer, tight, loose. Yeah. So we needed to tighten the car up just a little bit. So he says, "What do you think we should do?" And I said, "Well," so I came up with an idea. He said, "I like that idea. Let's try that." So we tried it, and he said, "That's it. That's all we needed. It's going to be great." Okay, cool. So we start the race. They didn't qualify very well, and I wasn't part of the team when they qualified, so it was middle of the pack. But now, in the first stint, he's lapping as fast as the leaders, and he's moving his way up through the field. All right. This is going to be good.
It is working.
Well, here he comes. Used to a much lighter car, Formula One car, with much better brakes. And I'm standing out there back then, and still today, it's the right front man that stops the car. The guy's changing the right front tire.
Yeah.
And you stand out there, and you hold your hand out, and you're supposed to put the right front right under your hand. And you have your tire and your gun and the hoses out there ready, and everybody else jumps over it and finishes a pit stop. He comes in, we're at the fast end of the pit lane, and back then there was no speed limit in the pits.
Oh, okay.
So they'd come into the pit lane 200 miles an hour. And he did. And he's coming, and I says, he's not going to make it. He's not going to make it. And I think about running back to the wall and getting out of the way, but I realize that I've thought too slow, and it's too late.
Yeah.
I just got to, so I put the hose down, and he goes by. The hose hooks onto something, and I go flying, like... And I have the gun. I refuse to let go of the gun because I'm afraid it's going to take somebody out over, in the pits.
Yeah.
So I go flying, which I don't know how far it was, but it was way far. And of course, I did this beautiful roll and popped up right behind the wing and grabbed the wing and started pulling it back, as if nothing happened. We practiced this.
It was all orchestrated.
Yeah, we've done
perfectly.
this before. So yeah. So, but that. When you run over a hose, it's
an infraction. It's a penalty. Yeah. It's something.
It's a drive-through. So they're so right now there, just getting them back, we lose a lap. Then we lose a lap because of the hose, and it wasn't much longer that the fitting broke. Oil fitting broke, and you can't repair something like that because the rule still states that you're not allowed to add oil in the race. And it had pumped some oil out, so even if we fixed the fitting, we were not out of oil, so we were done. Yeah. It was a great experience, and that was the only time I worked with Emerson, but we had a blast. And what I did learn from him was would be to go ahead and try it. Don't be afraid.
Right, yeah. I mean, you got a problem, you got to address it. Yeah. Get after it, and, take a chance. Mm-hmm. Use your knowledge, use your experience, and just go for it.
Gumption.
Yeah. So that was the 84 year.
Yeah.
84, and so then it bounced back, and now, how did you end up back with Preston Henn? This larger than life personality. This guy who's I remember reading about him racing offshore power boats, racing Porsche, racing Ferraris, racing literally around the world, going to Europe and racing. And how did you end up back with him? Well,
I'd known him and worked for him before, and the word on the street was he had just gotten a 962, which at the time there was only 5 in the country. It was a brand new race car. The 956s have been out, but only in Europe. No 962 that come to the country. So he was one of the first 5, and went home for the winter. I would have stopped by and check to see my old buddy Preston and check out his car.
Right.
I really wanted to see that car because that was the latest, greatest Porsche creation, right? And I've always been a Porsche fan, but I'm just a car fan. It could be
Yeah.
a Ferrari or whatever.
Right.
I like some brands more than others, but I just love cars. So,
Yeah.
but in this case, it was a new racing Porsche, and it was the thing at the time, so I had to go see it.
Yeah.
Well, he offers me the job, and next thing I know, I'm back with Preston.
And that's it.
And that was that. And that led on to the next year where we won the 2 races, and he did a partial schedule, so it's not like we did a season
Yeah.
and we happened to win those 2 races. We did, our season was 3 races,
Yeah.
and we won the 2 out of the 3. That
Yeah.
which were, you know,
Wow. And
third.
so 1985, you win the. They call it the 24 at Daytona back then,
Right.
or maybe the Sunbank 24. I forget who the
I
sponsor was
remember,
back
yeah.
there, but it was the 24 at Daytona. So you win Daytona, you go to Sebring and you win.
Mm-hmm.
And who is the guy? Who's the big name in the car at that time? Who's the driver?
Oh,
at that
A.J.
time?
Foyt.
It's A.J. Foyt.
Yeah, another childhood hero, of course, right? So that was a dream come true, being able to work with, a childhood hero who still, his career was mostly over at that point, but
A 4-time winner of the Indianapolis
he
500.
wasn't slow. He
Yeah.
was an old man, but he was still fast, and the proof paid off. He was fast enough to help us win that race.
Yeah. So back-to-back wins that year, and then that rolls. So a friend of ours who met you, I guess, in 1985 and came onto the team, Adam Masters,
Oh, yeah.
who I went to school with, and he and I were those same kids like you were. You said in '78 or whatever you were going to the races, maybe at Daytona and
Sure.
so forth. He and I started going to Daytona. I think the first year was 1981, and we went to the Paul Revere 250,
Oh, okay.
and we watched you guys racing, and then it was just a few years later where we got out of high school in '82. Adam wasn't sure what he wanted to do, and he hears about the swap shop team. We had watched them win the race in a 935 in 1983 with A.J. Foyt. We were just the guys hanging on the fence like you, and we heard about this team, and they were out of Fort Lauderdale. We were like, wow. And so Adam didn't know what he wanted to do, if he was going to go in the military, if he was going to go to college, and he just got in his mind that he wanted to go and see what he could find out about the T-Bird Swap Shop team. And went over and I guess knocked on the door, and I don't know if he saw you first or if he saw Mike Colucci first. I
It was one of the two of us.
It was one of the
That's
two.
all it was, yeah.
And as the story that I remember, he knocked and they said, kind of go away, kid. And then he came back, weeks later or a month later and knocked again. And they said, go away, kid. And then he went back another time until they finally said, okay, kid, come on.
It was that story, yeah.
You can sweep the floors.
Yeah, he just finally became a pain and was all right already. And it was only Mike and I, so we needed the help, truthfully.
Yeah.
It was just a matter of Preston saying, we could afford someone else. Yeah.
So there's a guy just like you almost knocking on the door. And so when I heard this from Adam, I thought, you got to be kidding me. So Adam goes to work, and his first race is in November of '84, I think, at the finale at Daytona.
Yeah, that's right.
And somehow he introduces me to you the very next year at that same race, because now he had been with you guys for a year, and hey, I got another guy who'd like to do this.
Right.
And we meet, and you say yes. I have no idea why you said yes, but I was happy to get involved. And in '86, I joined you guys, and I was lucky enough and fortunate enough to do that. And then here we are. Fast forward from all these years, we've been great friends all these years, and just had a blast. So it's kind of cool to hear this story about how you started. And it really makes sense that you sort of passed the baton. And I'm sure you have many more stories over the years of guys who knocked on the door.
Sure.
And who joined various different teams with you. So I think that's kind of something that is special about the racing world, about the racing community, because it's not like you go to school to become a racer.
No.
It's not like there's
Well,
a
now-
path,
actually,
right?
now you
well, now
can.
you can, but back then
But, yeah.
you didn't. You just had to figure out a way and convince somebody to say yes.
Right.
And so that's kind of cool that all that sort of played out.
Well, for example, at JLP Racing, just during the time I was there, we went through 100 people. Over 100 people, because and one of the team members kept count. He said, we're
really?
over 100 now. So, yeah. That some people lasted a day. You know.
That's incredible. Yeah,
No.
just amazing. So the 1985 season was a tremendous success with the big names like A.J. Foyt and Al Unser, another Terry Boutsen, right?
Bob Wallach. Let's not forget
Bob Wallach, incredible. So amazing success. So now here comes 1986. And I couldn't believe when I heard that the drivers that year were going to be A.J. Foyt, Danny Sullivan, who had just won the Indy 500 for Roger Penske the year before, and then this other guy named Arie Luyendyk. But everyone was talking about Arie Luyendyk like, this is a fast kid, like this kid's going to be really good. And now these were going to be the three guys driving the car that somehow I got on a team to work for. Just an amazing thing. You know, I couldn't believe what was happening. But so that year, 1986, talk us through that race a little bit.
Well,
I mean, that was an incredible race for me, the very first race. Unbelievable experience. But talk about that a little bit. You know, we ended up finishing that race not quite as well as we did, as you guys did in 1985, but tell us a little bit about that.
Well, the race went as planned. Everyone was fast, and we did a great job. The crew did a great job, and we were leading, had a comfortable lead at the end of the day. And you know, that's always the plan, but that's not. It's more than not. It doesn't go that way. But this time it went that way, and we made our last pit stop, and everything's looking great. We've got a couple-minute lead, and Preston Henn shouts out to an individual that's in the pit lane and gives him this sign. At the time, the boost control knob, which was all it was a knob for the turbocharger boost, the horsepower basically, was outside the car. It was no longer allowed to be inside the car because the drivers were always, you know, it was changing the dynamic of the racing so much you could just turn up the boost and pass them back. You know, you couldn't keep it there. But so IMSA had declared that you could still make it adjustable, but it had to be outside by a mechanic or whatever. So the knob's right there. And so this guy turns the boost up. All we had to do is go back out and do what we've been doing for 23 hours. And I'm just, oh no, because I know how much this is. You know, that's
you're
watching too much.
You're watching his wrist turn.
Yeah,
and
I'm watching the wrist turn,
and you thought, uh-oh.
Yeah, normally it's
did his wrist just break, or what happened?
Yeah. So before I could say anything, the car was out the pit lane, and AJ calls in almost immediately. This thing's going to blow itself up. We got to turn it down. It's not going to make it.
So why would he say that? Like, what was happening in the car to make him say that?
It was just, there was so much boost that the car was, who knows how much power it was making.
It was just
clearly
like a rocket ship.
Yeah, it was clearly enough power, that so much power that it wasn't going to last. And AJ having been driving cars for his whole life, he knew when too much was too much.
Right.
So I asked the guy, and I said, do you remember how much you turned it up? Absolutely. Are you sure? And he says, absolutely. And that's where I made my mistake, because I knew exactly how many turns it was from full stop. So just in case something like this happened, I already figured it out.
Yeah.
And so I was ready for this. And I didn't take advantage of being ready. I trusted him. And the car comes in, he does whatever, car goes back out, AJ calls in, he says, we got no power. You turned it down too much.
So from one spectrum to the other.
So now every time we come into the pit lane, even though there's no speed limit, we're losing our lead. It's just going away.
It's evaporating.
And we come into the pits. I got this, and I did it to where it was supposed to be. But meanwhile, there goes Al Holbert taking the lead and the win of the race. So we just gave that race away. We had it in the bag.
Wow. So all that experience, it just shows you the complexity of what it takes to win a Daytona 24-hour race? There's just one example, right? When you think about all the planning, all the resources of people and money and time that go into it, it's incredible, and it comes down to something as simple as that.
Yeah.
Maybe give people perspective. You've been around the race forever. Since the 80s, you've been on teams there and seen so many different dynamics. Maybe give people a sense for what does it really take to put together a group of people and a car and really have a legitimate chance to win a race like that. Like, what does it really take?
Well, the list of things that you need to win is really short. The list of things that's going to take you out is really long. So, car's got to be fast enough. Doesn't have to be the fastest car. I've never won that race from the pole. In fact, we were on the pole in '89, and we're leading to the very end, and the driver crashed the car, and we had to change the nose, and we lost the lead, and so we finished second. But we had 88 in the bag from the pole, but that didn't mean anything, we gave it away. But there are so many things that can go wrong that are just waiting to go wrong. And it can be mechanic make a mistake, because you have to do brake changes, and it sounds easy, but you're trying to do a brake change in 30 seconds, and 30 seconds per wheel, is kind of a number. That's a real fast number, but that's the thing. So you're trying to get these brake changes, and sometimes they go wrong. They go sideways, piston falls out, or something goes wrong, and you could lose the race right there. And I use that example because that happened to us in 2018.
Okay.
We were leading, and the mechanic messed up the brake stop, and suddenly we were out of it.
So just like that.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting how you say it. The list of what you need to win is short, but the list of what can take you out is long. There's like so many things. So who is it who is on the team? You hear these terms. You got crew members, you got a crew chief, you got a team manager, you got a race engineer. Who is that responsible person who's trying to orchestrate and maybe minimize that list, that long list of things that can take you out? Who's the mastermind of that?
It used to be we could run one car with 6, 7 guys, the long way, now it's gotten to the team I'm helping this weekend. I think we have 22 people.
22 people
for one car. Yeah, it has become so complex that it's just unbearable, the amount of people you need to get the job done.
And why is that? What is it? Is it purely technology, or is it just a whole different mindset of racing today versus then, or is it mainly technology?
It's technology. So, I didn't answer your question straight about who's mainly responsible.
Yeah.
The teams have gotten so big now that there's so many people responsible for so many different things that when it comes down to it, there is a crew chief that is leading the crew during pit stops. And before each pit stop, they go over what they're going to do. So that's pretty much what's driven during the race. It's just one guy, really, and everyone that's there knows what they're doing, knows what to do, and is good at it. And so other than mistakes happening,
right.
The team pretty much flows as it has been all week.
Right.
Because all week, every day, every session, you're treating it like it's a race situation. Yeah. When the driver leaves the pit lane, he leaves like it's race day. Because we're timing that. All that stuff is being timed all the time. Because it's part of getting everything so specific and so perfect that you're 1 or 2 seconds better than the other guy, because you know exactly how long it takes him to get from the cone to the box, from the box to the cone, leaving. You have that down pat, and a lot of things are happening. in the pit, other than just changing tires and fuel and driver change or whatnot. There's other service going on. Sometimes there's service that's been planned that gets done faster than the fuel, so it doesn't take any longer than the fuel. The fuel should be less than 40 seconds. The rule is now with GTDs, 40 seconds from dry to full is a 40-second fill. Everybody has to be the same fill time, so no one has a pit stop time advantage.
Okay.
So if you come in with a gallon or two, then it's less than 40 seconds. So anything you want to do to the car, you better get it done in 40 seconds. So that there's no extra time spent, and that's on the easy list. You have to be fast enough, and you have to spend not 1 second longer in the pit than necessary as the plan for the race plan.
Right.
And that's one of the things on the short list. And I have a saying that, and it's not my saying, someone else came up with it, that if you hit somebody, it's your fault. If somebody hits you, it's your fault. You weren't paying enough attention around you, that you didn't make the effort to be out of the way or to avoid some sort of scenario that was unfolding itself. Here comes a guy, look in your mirror, he's coming too fast. Just get out of his way. It's a long race.
Right.
And don't fight somebody for the corner, stuff like that. So we make that a rule. I said that to the drivers the other day. You get hit, it's your fault. You weren't paying attention.
That's got to be tough that's probably got to be tough for a young racer. Yeah, a young racer saying, what are you talking about?
3 of them are young guys, so they gave me a cross-eyed look, But once I explained it, then it's like, oh, okay, I get it, all right.
So the crew chief is really managing through, the pit stop action. You hear this on TV shows, so most people are, that it's a buzzword, strategy. You hear about teams who they won on a fuel strategy, they won on this strategy, and that's a whole other now piece to the puzzle.
Of course, strategy is a thing. It's not always a thing that happens. In terms of the way the series, the way the race is organized, and the way the pace car works, and they have a thing called the wave around. So if you're ahead of the leader in your class during the yellow flag, you can go by the pace car. So if you're between the pace car and the leader, you get a wave around. So you could start making up that lap that you're down. Mm-hmm. If you're down more than one, at least you're getting this one. Right. So that gives the opportunity for people that may have lost the lap to get their lap back, and it changes the dynamic of the racing.
Yeah, so that
a lot.
Yeah, that can change. That can totally alter the strategy, right?
Sure,
oh wow. Okay, we had built up such a margin, and now it's evaporated.
Yeah, and that's not something you can strategize. You just have. It's just a reaction. This is our out thing.
So if you had to throw a percentage on the 24-hour race at Daytona or Le Mans, and say what percentage does strategy play a part, could you do that, or is it just such an ever-changing thing that you just never know when strategy might win it for you or when it might not? Strategy
is always waiting there to be used when it's needed.
Okay.
And there is someone that is dedicated to that task. It can be the engineer, or it can be a strategist if the team's big enough to have a dedicated strategist. That's where the people count comes up. Yeah, they just keep the electronics, the equipment that's in the pit lane alone has several people dedicated to putting it up, setting it up, get it all working, because we have telemetry in these cars, and that requires a lot of wires and a lot of antennas, and and a geek basically to make sure it all works,
and to understand what they're seeing. All that intelligence that's coming down.
That's the engineer's task, is to be able to understand and interpret the data that what we're seeing on them.
It's like an operating room.
Yeah,
it's literally like an operating room, right?
You've been there and you can see all the screens that are showing literally just data. Over 100 channels of data that are coming through live.
Unbelievable. Yeah. So when you think about the change, I think about that team in 1986 and the success that we had, even though we finished second, I still thought, wow, isn't this amazing that you had a group of guys that didn't do this every day all year long, that just sort of came together, and how it worked. And that was another example of it's about people and about relationships and about, you know, work ethic, like you say, and really being committed to saying, hey, we want to make this thing work. We're going to do everything we possibly can to do our part to make it work. And, you know, in '85, you got this team that I think I remember hearing Al Holbert reference Preston Henn's T-Bird Swap Shop team as he didn't want to get beat by a band of gypsies.
That's right.
Something to that effect. I remember. Were those the words?
Yeah.
Because, you know, he was masterful, an incredible engineering mind, an incredible driver, a planner, everything. And he had, you know, the best of everything in sports car racing at that time. That seemed to be like the gold standard team, right? Like everything was there. And
they were.
And to get beat by this band of gypsies was a tough thing to take. Yeah. But it really just spoke, I guess, to this thing that we're, you know, getting back to is people and commitment and wanting to, you know, do well.
The right individuals were there, you know.
Yeah.
Because it gets back down to the basic. What do you need to do? You got to get this thing filled up and tires changed as fast as possible. You got to beat the fuel, and get the drivers have to change out so that we're not waiting on the drivers either. And that's a good driver change. A top driver change is 16 seconds, 17 seconds, where it's fully from belts tight to belts tight, and the door closed, door open, door closed, 16 seconds.
Yeah,
fully changed out.
Yeah,
and those are the pros.
Yeah. It's funny because people watch races today, they see NASCAR races, and, you know, those stops are
ridiculous, yeah.
If a stop's 16 seconds in NASCAR, they're done, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy. But they're not getting in and out of the car, right? They're just banging a wheel on and banging a wheel off, or banging a wheel off, banging a wheel on, and, you know, send them. So it's a different dynamic in sports car racing because there's more to do. You know, you got that driver piece of it. So it's quite a different situation.
Yeah, and those guys are magic too. I watch them and have full respect for those, from the NASCAR guys.
Yeah.
I love NASCAR racing.
Well, I think it's awesome that you're sharing all this, you know, for people that I hope listen to this for a long time to come, who are really wondering what this 24-hour race is all about. I think this gives them a little different perspective as to what the teams are trying to do out there, because I think a lot of people, they just hear about this race and they say it's a 24-hour race. What does that mean? And I say, well, the cars race for 24 hours. They never stop. And they're like, what are you talking about? This is insanity.
Yeah, well,
yeah, it kind of is.
As soon as you had two cars, you had a race.
Yeah.
100 years ago. So it's a thing that just finally it came to be, okay, 24 hours is a good number, let's do that. And it has come to the point now where it is so competitive and it's crazy close. You'll see if you watch the race, as it should go. By the 18th hour, you'll see that the top 5 of each class, they'll be, you know, they'll be on the same lap.
They'll be on the same lap.
Each other. Yeah.
Yeah, and that wasn't. I mean, we saw some of that back in those days, maybe in the 80s or 70s, but not like today. It is truly amazing how close the racing is for as long as it goes. It's almost like 24 sprint races.
Yeah. Well, you have to hand that shaping of today's racing. You have to give that credit to IMSA on how they've designed their yellow flag scenarios, and it's changed the dynamic. It allows that close racing to stay close all day.
And to make it interesting and so forth. Well, we've covered a lot of ground on those races back in the mid '80s and all those successes. You know, after you got done, you know, doing that and working in Indy and doing that, you decided to venture out and now change your game a bit and move from being a mechanic or a crew chief or an engineer who's, you know, trying to, you know, come up with all kinds of new things to make the car faster, to now saying, hey, you want to have your own team.
Right.
So what What was it about that was interesting to you that you wanted to do that?
Easy, money.
Yeah,
it was. That's where the next direction, call it, as you go up the ladder, is to have your own team, because that gives you the opportunity to actually make some money. Because these budgets have become crazy now, but it's always been expensive to go racing, and the plan is to get more money in that you spend out, and you make a little money at the end of the season.
It's like any other business, right?
It's like any other business, and those opportunities were presenting themselves all around me. That why don't you do this? We need. So it just happened that I had to start my own team because the opportunity was there, and I couldn't ignore it or let it go by. And that's what happened the rest of those years, is having my own team, and that's where Ferrari Challenge comes in, because I got involved in that 20-something years ago. Since the 348 days is when we started getting involved in the Ferrari Challenge. And that's a nice bread and butter series where you have it's gentlemen racers that they either know about it because they heard about it some way, but mostly how they hear about it is they walk into their dealership, and that dealership's promoting the series. And because the big dealership, they sell a car, they get another allocation, and it's good for the dealership to get that exposure. So and then they give some help to the driver as well for doing it. Going it's expensive, but these guys are where they want to go racing, they want to have a great time, and they have the budget to do so. And that was our bread and butter for 20-something years, is always having the Ferrari Challenge team as part of whatever we were doing.
And so that really helped to pay the bills.
Kept the lights on, yeah.
Kept the lights on and create a little spending money.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, it was the pro racing. As much as I loved it, like I said, the opportunity, when it presented itself, it was an easy decision to make. I said, yeah, I love racing and but this is going to be good. Let's do this. And back to your question about who makes the decisions and things like that. The engineer is the guy getting the car set up to go as fast as it can, to be as comfortable and easy to drive and quick and up until the race starts. The engineer, his job is done. He's still there because in case the conditions change a lot and the car handling changes a lot, well, he'll make a call on what changes to make to the car. But besides that, he's just a spectator now. And it's the crew chief's job to manage the crew.
Okay.
And there's a lot of that goes on within the team, that prior to the race, the job's one thing, and then when the race starts, the job's is something else.
Yeah.
You have to, it's not multitask, but multi-jobbing, when those two separate things.
So so making the money was the big motivator, but then it kind of sounds like you really enjoyed the development side of it too, because you've done all these different pieces in motorsports, and now you're the owner, and now you're having to find people to do those pieces that you were the guy responsible for on all those, and so you really knew what it took, whether it be the character of the person, their commitment to it, their talent level, their knowledge, their aptitude or whatever. So it kind of was a natural thing for you in that regard too.
Yes,
right?
Of course. And it's having done every job.
Right.
I know
what it takes
when you're faking it and when you're not. So it's
well, that whole thing, I'm looking over some notes because there was maybe we'll jump off and talk a little bit about maybe having some fun, like your love of cars, your love of race cars. I heard somebody tell me that that maybe you did some work to maybe the most valuable, highest priced race car on the planet.
Oh, geez, yeah, sure.
And this car is a very special Ferrari.
One of three.
One of three ever made. Preston Hen, this larger-than-life character that we were talking about earlier, owns this car. So what can you tell us about that whole thing? I mean, now we're talking about maybe having a little fun. It's not business, right? It's not right now. It's something a little different. What was that all about?
Well, back to 1981 when I was working at this shop, they had that car there and back pushed in the corner where there was big holes in it where the body needed to be redone. It's all aluminum. You've got a big hole in the front, big hole here, big hole there, and it's just a body on a body shop type trolley for specifically for getting the body work done and then getting painted and whatnot. And that's the first time I saw it. And Preston happened to be there the day that he wanted the car to get started working on, and they were dragging out, and he was present for the drag out of the mothballs. And he told me the story, and he had seen that car race in 1962, 3, 4, whatever it was. As a young man, he went to Le Mans for the first time and saw that car race.
That's what that was about.
Yeah. And he said, that's my favorite car. Fast forward, he becomes a wealthy man. When you're a wealthy man, you meet other wealthy men, and he ends up meeting the guy that owns the car. And he tells him, if you ever want to sell that car, it's mine. I'll pay you whatever price you want. Well, the car ends up being used by the man's son to go to college, and it gets beat up, and so the kid decides he's going to do a restoration, and the car just gets blown apart in pieces, and that's how it stays. So fast forward, after some time, the gentleman calls Preston and says, hey, you still interested? Preston says, $11,500 is what my recollection of the price that he paid. I may be mistaken, but I'm pretty sure Preston telling him himself, himself, that that's what he paid for the car back in whenever it was. It was in the mid-'70s or something when he finally got the car back. And he pushed it in the corner as well, but he one day was going to do it. And this turns out to be now, and I'm there, and so I'm helping and trying to get the thing, and then it goes back into the mothballs. I come back to work for him in '84, and now the car is, the aluminum's done, but it looks pretty much the same, but all the aluminum's been fixed, and it's still on that same trolley, however many years, 3 years later. And now he's serious. In our spare time, we're going to get this thing done. I want it done in time for the Bahama Festival, which is a reunion of a race that was there in the 60s that car had been. It was raced there. So he wanted it done in time for that. So we're all hands on deck working on this car. And, so I fabricated. Well, there was a lot of stuff that was rusty and gone, so I had to fabricate. I'm a fabricator by then. I had some skills in fabricating, so I made all the stuff that needed to be made. Meanwhile, the camper was done. So it was just a pure, complete restoration that was done. We had no idea what the car was worth. Preston himself had no idea. Yeah. It wasn't until we went to the Bahamas that this car, someone came up to him and offered him $400,000. No, I'm sorry, $150,000 for it. This is in at the end of 1984. And he comes over to us because the car is being showed, we're having it on display, and he actually took it out for one of the practice sessions and said, these guys are nuts, I'm not driving it anymore, let's just show it, and we'll go home. And okay, fine. So while we're sitting there, people are coming over, and they say, what is this thing? Is this a comp car? Is this a competition coupe? Because they did do a run of competition coupes that looked very similar, but they're not the same. People were thinking it was that. And then, what car is this? What serial number is this? And then one guy finally, he knew the serial number, and he'd wondered where the car had been. He says, where's this car been? He says, and he just quietly walked away. He offered Preston $150,000 for it. And Preston came back to us, and he said, somebody's asking me $150,000 for this car. Can you believe it? I said, Preston, you're not going to sell it. He goes, oh, no, I'll never sell it. I said, okay, don't sell it. You don't need the money. It's a beautiful car, don't you?
Yeah.
He said, no, it's not for sale. We get home, and it's a couple months later. The guy that he bought it from calls him, wanting to buy it back, and offers him some crazy sum of money. He says, you would not believe what I just got offered for the other car. Says, really? How much? He goes, too much. You're not going to sell it, are you? No, I'm not going to sell it. It's okay. So, and to the day he died, he never sold it.
And today, so to give some people some perspective, okay. You're talking about buying this car in the late 1970s for $11,000 or $10,000, what? $11,500. Today, the word on the street is this car is worth $100 million.
That's the word on the street. No one's stood up to pay it, but someone did offer, that I did hear, offered $75 million for it.
$75 million.
That was real money. That was a real offer.
Yeah.
And that would be, even at that low price of $75 million, would be a record for the highest price ever paid for a car.
Yeah. Just an incredible story. You talk about barn finds and values.
Yeah, that's pretty much the best one going.
The best barn find story of all time in the car world and in the race car world. What makes that car so special? What was the history of that car? It was one of three, but what about its history made it so special?
I think it's just because it was one of three.
Okay.
It did, from what I understand, set some sort of speed record that year. And the record still stands because the tracks changed for a GT car. So it still holds some sort of speed record almost on, right?
Where are the other two cars?
And it's a street car. One was destroyed, and the other one, it's a red car, and I don't know the exact history of it, but for some reason it's just not as special.
So you don't know where that car is?
I don't know where it is, but people do know where it is. It exists,
Yeah. So this one's here in the United States, and who knows where the other one is?
Yeah.
Wow.
No, and I've driven that thing. I was up and down Sunrise Boulevard. Back then when we didn't know.
I kind of remember going for maybe I shouldn't say that. I remember riding in some pretty cool cars with you in Fort Lauderdale.
Yeah.
Street cars and race cars. Some pretty cool stuff.
Well, we would warm them up once in a while because we had them in storage there, and they were running. We got to drive. We got to at least start them.
Yeah.
Well, we could probably drive them too. So up and down Sunrise Boulevard, we knew we would get in trouble because, he pretty much owned the police in the area, and so I've actually driven that thing irresponsibly.
Yeah. Well, drive it like you stole it is what they say, right? Drive it like you stole it. Yeah, that's awesome.
Guilty as charged.
So, there's so much to talk about. We can go on for. It's just so much fun talking to you and getting a chance to do this and hearing some of these stories. That was the Preston Hen story.
Sure.
Why don't we? Do you have a good AJ Foyt story?
God.
Can you think of any? Anything that was? I mean, that one that you told about him saying, "Hey, this car's gonna blow up. What'd you do?" And that whole deal. But any other stories that come to mind about AJ?
Yeah.
I mean, because you worked for AJ at the Speedway.
Yes, I did.
Didn't you? Right?
Yeah.
What year was that?
He took a liking to me at the team, the swap shop team. He took a special liking to me for some reason, which was I totally appreciate, and I thank the Lord for it. But I learned a lot from him, actually.
What? Maybe talk about that relationship.
Here we are at Indianapolis 500, I don't know, 1986 or 7 or something, because I did 3 years, I think, at the Speedway for him. Just only the Speedway. And I'm all into shocks already. By that point, I had been building shocks and revolving shocks, and into that part of engineering on race cars, because there's a big advantage of having shocks right. And so we had I had some ideas with AJ, and AJ was always great about saying, "Yeah, sure, let's try it." And so with shocks, and so I changed the shocks, and we can go out, and he goes out, and he does 3 laps. He comes in, gets out, and I'm standing there at the wall, and he comes up to me. I'm back to the grandstands and in front to the car, and he walks up to me, and I said, "So what do you think?" And he's looking at me, and then he looks past me. He goes, "See the one in the purple?" "What? Did you see the one in the purple?" "What are you talking about? The one in the purple?" I turn around, and there's some lady up there wearing purple that should be maybe wearing more clothes and more supportive garments.
This is in the 80s. It wasn't.
It was 1986 or whatever. Yeah. So, and I turned around and I said, "Dude, what what about the shocks? Oh, they're fine.
So
He says, can you go talk to her for me?
that's a great one. So when you did right with AJ, everything was good.
Yeah. No, I'll never forget the first year, which was 85, after we won the races, and go to the Speedway that year, and it's raining. And I said, hey boy, ever see the museum here? I said, no, but I've heard about it. Let's go. So we go to the museum, but instead of going up where everybody else goes in, we go in this little side door down on the bottom. You know, it's because it's weird in the way it's configured. You go in on an upper floor than this was. This was a couple of floors down from where the normal general public would go. So he bangs on the door. Some old man answers the door. We go in, and there's all these cars. Just fantastic collection of cars. That some of them had just rolled off the winner's circle in 1928 or whatever.
Yeah.
And they just got pushed in the corner and not even wiped off. And these cars were all in line to either be restored or not.
Right.
Because at that point, it wasn't so cool for the car to be as is, no restoration, unrestored.
Yeah.
That's a big thing now.
Yeah.
Back then, it kind of wasn't, so they were restoring everything. So these cars were always all in line again. And there was cars like I had never seen other than on TV or in a magazine or pictures. So it was just, it was heaven, to see all these cars. So he gave me the tour there, and then there was another floor, the same thing, and there were all the restorations being done and stuff.
Sort of like a vault, the IndyCar vault at the museum at the Speedway.
The 500 vault, it was fantastic.
Wow.
And to see this part of the museum, which I think you pay to see that part extra. You could actually go down there, but at the time I don't think you could. So then we go upstairs, and of course, he's the king at that time, right?
Yeah.
So, and then we see the upstairs part too, and it shows you that in between signing
I've
autographs.
seen that part. I've been to that part.
Yeah, and it's a rotating, show. They're changing cars out all the time because they have so many of important cars, and they've also. It used to be just Indy cars. Now they have sports cars and other types of cars there on display. That's at the Speedway. So that was a special moment, AJ moment. It was fun.
I bet. Who had that kind of opportunity?
Right. Yeah, and set up things that I still to this day do religiously were secrets that he gave. Not secrets, but just principles.
What we're talking about, setups for suspension and shocks.
Mm-hmm.
Certain ways to make the car go faster.
Right.
In different situations.
Right.
Just little combinations, I guess, that he had tucked away to say, okay, when it's this situation, this temperature, this track, this corner,
like but it was
whatever
just
it is.
General conversations about when it was time to do the setup, he'd be engaged. And he said, what are you doing with this? What are you doing with that? And he says, so he would really participate. He wasn't just a driver that would come and show up and, drive.
I do remember that. I mean, with this short time that I had around him in that 86 time, between Daytona, Sebring, the Palm Beach Grand Prix, I guess when we ran that silly Heine Wines car and Danny Ungaius and AJ were in the car.
Yeah.
That was a crazy car, but just in that short time, what I do remember about AJ was, he was, as you said, he was sort of a racing king, but boy, you sure didn't feel like that as a member of the team, because it didn't matter what you were doing. He appreciated the significance of whatever it was that you were doing, and he would come around and talk to all of us.
Yeah, he's engaged.
Ask, hey, how are you doing? What's this? What's that? Try this. I remember the phrase, my daddy told me to do this way. He would say that about different things, and that was always something super cool about a guy, like that in the racing world.
Extremely valuable, short times that I had with him, but they stuck with me. The things that he taught me, I stuck with me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, here's a guy who's won Indy 4 times. Well, he won everything. Well,
Yeah.
wow, right? So
Right.
with the G240s and
Right, he's won in every discipline, right? He's won
Yeah,
in
he's won
sports cars, he's won in Indy cars, he's won in NASCARs, he's won in Le Mans, he's won Daytona, he's won it all.
So,
Sprint cars,
when a guy
dirt
like
cars.
that speaks,
Yeah, you listen.
you listen.
You listen to that. Well, wow. Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground tonight, and it's just a real treat to have you here and to have you share these stories with people. I hope that people have enjoyed listening to it. I'm sure they have. It'll be something to look back on for many years and hear some of these inside stories that maybe people have never heard before.
I've got a ton of them
About racing and people. So maybe tonight the timing of all this is going to sort of inch me along to get back doing this show. We used to have a lot of fun doing this. I did it for almost 2 straight years before the pandemic. And so it's just a blast, and maybe we can do it again another time. Here on Porsche Night with the guys from Cycle Fever TV. It's kind of I was thinking about it earlier today. I know that you love motorcycles.
Sure.
And you've got a passion for not only cars, but also motorcycles. So I thought, well, wow, that's kind of cool too. We're doing a show with Cycle Fever TV and talking Porsches and Ferraris and everything else. And I thought, well, that's a pretty cool setup.
I still have my high school motorcycle.
You do?
Yeah.
What is it?
350 Ducati Scrambler. It's a single-cylinder enduro type of bike. Yeah.
So you just always kept this tucked away somewhere all these years?
Yeah.
And so, does it run now?
No.
Doesn't?
No.
How far is it from running?
It was just once upon a time it got parked and never ridden again, and it would need to do like they do on TV on those shows. It needs to be cleaned up and get the carburetor out, and like they on the one show that they have, it seems they make it look so simple that I would just clean the carburetor, put a battery in it, and it'll start, and it'll be fine, and go drive it, but something like that, and I think it would come back to life.
Well, I'm sure Shawn and John and Shawn's dad, Hank, who sort of started this whole Cycle Fever TV thing, they'd enjoy hearing about those motorcycle stories, because these guys are big into motorcycles. They just love it.
A lot of bikes.
Yeah, so I'm sure that you guys could have a lot of fun talking motorcycles. So maybe the next time you come on, we'll talk about motorcycles with those guys. All right, all right, guys. Well, an amazing night tonight here on Porsche Night. Shawn's giving me a little bit of a word here. So what do we got going on, Shawn?
Before I let you guys go, because a lot of people have sent some stuff in, more than I can read off here, but there's a few I'll shout out. So Chris Sharp says hello to the old ASF crew.
Yeah.
Oh,
okay.
American Speed Factory. Nice.
All right. Louis Amores says, my hero Shapiro, a legend.
All right.
So I want to be sure you got that one out there. Piero Ruggiero wants to recall about driving the 935 on Commercial Boulevard.
So
I don't
that
know
was
what
just
he's talking about.
Yes, I figured that was just a misprint. I just want to be sure. So, Louis Amores, another one calling you his hero and a legend. And let's see here.
Nice to hear, of course.
And there was one more. This one came in a different. From 901 Sport. Ask him about the Alucraft.
oh,
the Alucraft car, sure.
So that was
time for that?
Yeah, we could do it. We could do a short piece on that, because that was the starting point of your own team, right? The Shapiro Motorsports, Alucraft. That was your first team.
Yeah,
right?
Pretty much. Yeah.
Porsche 962. So take it away. Tell us a little bit about how that came about.
Well, I had a customer just walk in the shop one day, it was this guy, and he had heard from someone about this guy here that does 960, the 962 expert or whatever. Back then, there weren't that many of us really in the country working on them, so it was kind of all right. So he says, I want you to build me 2 962s. So of course, at first, it's hard to believe. It's like, oh, really? I says, what do you want to do with them? I want to race them in IMSA. I said, oh, okay. He says, why don't you just buy them? Well, but at that point, 962s were the bargain of the century when they first came out. They were just over $200,000. We're talking 1984 money,
Yeah.
but still, compared to
lot
the
of money.
prices of other race cars, they were really a bargain. Indy car was that much money, so, and it was just nothing to it. So, but by this time, which was 1989, the price of the cars had gotten to $500,000 or $600,000, so they were really not so cheap anymore. And so it made sense. I said, well, let me do the math and see what I could build them for. So I came up with $260,000 a piece, as I could build a car. And what that was, when I say build the cars, it was our own body completely. Like when you parked the alley car parked next to another 962, you realized how different they were.
Yeah.
And because I had other 962s around.
Yeah, but it wasn't until you would do that side by side that you'd really see it.
Right. No.
From the eye, it still had the silhouette of the 962.
Yeah.
But it was a taller. It was taller, right?
The sides were taller.
The sides were taller.
There was they were shorter. There was all kinds of things. So the chassis we got from a place called Chapman in California, which made an excellent racing chassis. And he, when you parked that next to a Porsche chassis, it didn't look the same, but all the pickup points for the suspension were in the right place. But it was very different. It was literally 8 times stronger. When we do torsional testing of chassis in motorsports, and to twist a 962, a factory 962, is about 2,000 pounds per degree. This chassis was 20,000 pounds.
Oh my goodness.
It was 10 times stronger, which, the most important thing, it was way stronger of a capsule for the driver.
So it was a safety thing for the driver.
To be honest, the 962 chassis were dangerous in the way they were built. They were built very flimsy. They were light that way, but boy, were they unsafe. And sadly, a lot of people lost their lives in a 962.
Yeah.
People don't talk about that.
Yeah.
And that wasn't, we weren't going to do that. So we bought that chassis, and we bought things we had to buy: engine, transmission from Porsche, and a lot of the suspension pieces. I made my own version of it, change the geometry of the suspension and other touches that we made our own. I made the car our own, basically, and it was a cool car, and we took it to Daytona in 1990. And were you on the team?
Yeah, I was hanging around.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I don't remember exactly those kind of details anymore. But
Yep.
We finished 4th,
Yeah.
and that was up against the 2 Jaguars, which were dominating at the time. They were unbeatable, and Yost was finished 3rd. So
Quite a showing.
it was for a home-built car. It was pretty cool, and we had great drivers in it. We had Hurley Haywood, king of all sports car drivers. Hans Stuck, another you could call one of the top-tier guys who was ever lived. A guy named Harold Gross, who was a filler but fast enough, and then the money guy who wasn't bad. He wasn't too slow, so it was great. We had a great run with a home-built car, and that that was kind of the last time home-built cars were coming into the game. There were other people that did home-built 962s, but we were call it late to the game. But we had a good run.
So what do you think? Al Holbert at the time, he was the Porsche North America Motorsport boss, and however you wanted to call it back then, right? If you wanted a Porsche 962, it had to sort of come through that way in the early time? It came through
No.
motorsports, or how did that work?
No. Well, for example, in order to be able to build the cars we built, I had to go to the factory, sit down with Jürgen Barth, who was the head of competition at the time, who was also a very accomplished driver, right? And for Porsche, and basically begged for the permission to buy parts and not to be reselling them and things like that.
Right.
They wanted to make sure I was going to be a legit guy doing just motorsports and buying parts that I needed.
Right.
And so that was a great meeting, and that all came through to be able to do that, to facilitate building our own cars, because we needed parts. Because there was 962 parts that I needed to run.
So I guess what I was saying was early on.
I'm sorry I didn't answer your question about buying cars.
Yeah.
No, when you bought a car, you bought it straight from the
Porsche?
racing department. Yeah.
Okay.
Probably through Jürgen, I'm thinking.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then the cars came over, and then there were certain parts that I guess were only available from Porsche, and then as teams started to develop cars, they started to develop their own bits, and to the point where now it was a whole car.
Right.
I kind of remember that in '86 when Danny Sullivan came to the team, having a breakfast, and he sat around the table and he was asking questions about, what were Preston's plans, for a car, and would he think about building his own car, and talking about how Penske would, build their own parts and do and I just thought it was fascinating conversation. Here was my, my first time there, and I'm listening to him talk about this. So I guess that was what that was all about, really.
Mm-hmm.
Racers just trying to do whatever they could to gain an edge and work with a manufacturer like Porsche, but then expand upon it, improve upon it, and make it go faster.
Yeah. And back then you could. You can't now.
It's a different game.
It's a different game. There's a thing called BOP, Balanced Performance, and that is to try to manage the competitive ability of each cars and try to manage that so that the cars are as close as possible in performance. And for example, while we were here for the Roar last weekend, a BOP change came out during the weekend, where some guys got a little weight, some guys got a little this, some guys got a little, they
they're planning for the race and they've got to change now.
They take away weight, or they make you run a higher ride height, or more, or as a minimum ride height, for example. On all the different different classes, there's minimum ride heights, and or minimum wing angle, or what else did they do that they threw at us one year?
Restrictor size.
Restrictor, exactly. That's a killer. If you get a restrictor change, that's murder. When they do that,
that's just going to choke the horsepower down to pennies on the dollar.
Yeah. Some of these cars aren't. They're. You take a Lamborghini, for example. It has a 40 millimeter restrictor. On each side, one on each side. Which, when it's kind of a tiny hole, so you have that big motor breathing through those tiny little holes, and so it chokes it down quite a bit.
So they're just trying to control a thing and keep it balanced, and they're in this constant tussle, battling with the manufacturers, because sometimes these changes impact certain manufacturers more than others, and they're trying to keep the peace and keep everybody happy so that they keep building cars and bring them to the races. That's got to be a really tough scenario to manage through. Yeah. Wow, that's another whole side to the racing game that we can probably take up a whole show to talk about that, right?
It's a hateful subject for a lot of people. They really don't like it, but that's the game, and so you got to play the game.
Yeah.
And you could say that everyone's sandbagging, because they don't want to get hit with a BOP change. So, but it's not true, because they can tell when you're sandbagging.
Right.
If you're sandbagging, you're going to have to be very, very good at it.
Yeah.
Because
there's too many eyes
after each session, there's a separate data system that's taking the same channels, measuring out of all the different things, wheel speed, GPS speed versus, gear position and engine RPM and temperatures and pressures and all these different things that as a smart engineer you can make a small change to and have an impact on the performance of the car. But they have their own system in each car with their own data stick. So after each session, you take that data stick and you take it to IMSA.
Give it to the man.
And they have a bunch of engineers, looking at everyone's data all the time.
Wow.
So they're
When did
always
that start? When did that kind of analysis start?
But they have created systems and algorithms that can analyze all that data in such a way that they can measure performance very accurately. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's cool stuff, but the racers hate it.
Yeah. Well, it makes their job harder.
Yeah.
And it's more unpredictable. You never know what's going to happen. But hasn't that always been what racing's about?
Yeah.
It's the same thing. It's the same struggle that's always been around.
Yeah.
All right. Well, John, as I said, it is a pleasure having you in here. It's just
Thank you,
awesome. I'm so happy that we were able to do this, and I look forward to doing it with you again
I hope
sometime.
So.
And I think we'll have a great time, maybe talking some motorcycles with the guys from Cycle Fever TV next time.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll have you out to see one of their bike shows as a
I'm
result.
in.
All right. So thanks to everybody behind the scenes, Shawn, John, and John, who run everything for us back there. Thanks, guys. You did an awesome job as always. I guess it's like riding a bike, man. I haven't done this in 2 years, and we jump right back in, and it just seems like everything went spot on. So thanks so much, guys. And then, of course, my wife is in the background over here, and Deborah with John is in the background. So we got a whole support system here at behind us and really cheering us on through this. So thanks again for joining us tonight. We look forward to doing it again. And until then, enjoy some racing and enjoy some cars, and get up and see the 24 Hours of Daytona this weekend. If you've never been to that event, you will not be sorry if you go there. You'll have a blast. It's going to be cold as heck this weekend, like it is most 24s. But if you can get some cold weather gear, go up there, have a blast. It's so much fun. There's a lot to see. You're going to meet some awesome people up there and just have a great time. So until next time, that's it for us on Porsche Night with Cycle Fever TV.